If you're a devotee of the Secret Garden Tour, then you've been lucky enough to have been in Jeanette Richoud's garden. So here I am with Jeanette. How long have you been in this house, Jeanette?
Well, we bought it 4 years ago, but it took us a while to actually get this backyard modified. This is my third summer in this garden, so grown 3 batches of tomatoes. This is probably the worst batch of tomatoes, unfortunately, because of the weather. But I'm learning what works and what doesn't work.
So how did you come up with this design for the garden?
Well, we wanted to utilize the aspects of what we had here. We had a slope. We had the covered with ivy. It was just covered with ivy, and we tried to figure out, well, there's rocks here already, so we didn't want to have to take out those huge rocks that somebody had sort of a little bit of a drop off, was more like it. And so we utilized that and came up with a design with the help of an architectural designer. And it took us about 9 months to actually get the guy finished the project. So I was in here that first summer after I got my Master Gardener training in 2006. So this is my third summer.
Now, what was the soil like that you had here?
Well, the soil was gravel. We took the gravel in the rock garden and left it. We modified it a little bit, but then because we could have essentially new space, we added very rich organic soil from a local place, and it's been very productive. It's very productive. My tomato plants grow very well in this soil, and that's the other nice thing about it, is I can sit or I can stand and pick things, and have space to look underneath to get all the tomatoes that are ripe, which aren't that many this year, but at least I have good visibility. The downside is it's expensive initially, but it lasts a long time if it's built well, and the slugs and earwigs like to hide in it, but also the frogs. So it's kind of got some good things going for it, and not perfect either.
Well, I would imagine that the stone would hold a lot of heat as well.
That's true, it does. And so when I plant my tomatoes, I can actually plant them deep, rather than some people plant theirs kind of on the side because the soil is warmer on the top. Well, because of the concrete, I can actually plant them deeper, which makes them more tolerant of less water. They can stand to be more drought tolerant that way. You can't do that, unfortunately, with peppers or other things, but if you've got rich soil that holds moisture, that's another key to more sustainable agriculture. And we use drip irrigation. We use an in-ground berm over here. The raspberries are actually in good soil, but we had the guy, before the fence got finished, we had him dig out some of the gravel and take it away. So we actually have like 18 inches in some places where the soil is good soil. It takes less water that way because you don't, with a berm you've got it exposed like this, and so it takes more water. So we decided to do it in the ground so that we could maintain the moisture better. Because it's very sandy soil around here, lots of gravel, and even hard pan. We've got hard pan back there in the middle. Very hard to dig out new space once you've done it. So we had foresight in doing, besides the terracing, we did some in-ground berms over here and on the other side as well, so that we would have good soil to work in.
Let's go see the tomatoes because I'm really excited about them.
Okay. I have got tomatoes in different places, trying to experiment with different cages, different varieties. I have 25 plants this year because I wanted to try some different things, and I have 16 varieties. Most of them didn't do as wonderful as I'd hoped because of the weather this summer, but I do have a lot of good set on these, and because my soil is so rich, this is a paste tomato that still may have some fruit. What I did with all of them though is to make sure that I kept the foliage down so that the flowers would set just the amount that I wanted here. So we've got things that have been cut off that you can see. This one is a determinate. This is Oregon Spring, which I thought would do a lot better than it wound up doing. There's a couple ripening in there. But
well, let's talk about what is a determinate.
Determinate means it grows more like a bush, and the indeterminate grows more like a vine. So that's why I have to keep cutting them off, because otherwise they'd want to be this tall. Especially with good soil, you have a lot more growth of the leaves and foliage, and you really want the fruit. So that's the difference. And with the Oregon Spring, it is a determinate, but I have had them get fairly large, so I've got it in a little bit bigger cage than it wound up using. But it is, at least in the past, it was a very good producer for me. Over here, the Seattle's Best of All are still ripening, so I still may get some from it. Some of the bigger ones, they have much more difficulty ripening now. It's nearly October already. It's the 22nd of September, so we still have a little bit of ripening they will do, but not as much, unfortunately, as I'd like. The red plastic is supposed to help them produce better. I'm experimenting. I've got some on the red plastic and some not on the red plastic. I haven't really figured that, that it really made that much difference, at least not this summer. It might in another summer when the conditions were a little better for tomatoes. There's some cherry tomatoes though that do a lot better because they ripen a lot faster because they're smaller. So I have a variety of different sizes of things. Some of them are ripening a lot better. Flamme, which is an orangey yellow one, that's a small one. I've gotten quite a few off of that. But some of the others, I have to trim, and I'll show you how to do that. This little bush, which is a small fruited plant called Sprite, has gone crazy, so I'm trying to prune off some of the extra little fruit that I don't think is going to ripen. So I'll take that off, and some of these leaves that are not, that are, going dry, I'm going to trim off a little more of that too. What I want left is fruit to ripen, and I will water it a little bit, but I cut back on water because that way when the colder weather comes they won't just split. That's another problem with this time of year is if they've got too much moisture in them, they're just going to split more.
I want to ask you a question about the curled leaves.
Yeah.
What does this mean?
Well, at times I've thought it was significant, and at times I have not thought it was a significant factor. I think it depends on the variety, because they've basically all been treated the same, and curled leaves sometimes indicates that they're not getting enough water, but I've had a lot of curling. I think it may be due to cold weather as well.
This is such an innovative trellis that you have here, Jeanette. Can you tell us about how you made it?
Yes, it does have deer fencing on the top, and then it's just 2x4s. But one wonderful thing about terraces is that you can drape things over the side, but then if it rains, then you've got them in a lump on the bottom. So my husband built this here for us so that we could have this zucchetta, which is a summer squash similar to zucchini. Actually, the official name is Trombetta del Albinja. But anyway, I get it from Renee's Gardens, and I love it because it is a better product than zucchini for me, and I grew it back in Nebraska. So anyway, so we can grow it on the trellis here, but then when it gets long enough, we put it over this, and it is even on the bench over here.
And I would imagine that there's a lot of air circulation. That's helpful too, to prevent disease.
Right, exactly. Good air circulation, and a lot of pruning to keep it from getting overcrowded.
Show us how you would prune this.
Well, I'd probably get to a spot where I've got a joint, and this one's actually going the other way. But I recently did prune it, but if I was going to prune it, I would prune off just halfway up here so that it just didn't go all the way into tomatoes.
So Jeanette, what does it taste like?
Well, I think it has a better flavor than zucchini because it doesn't get watery when you cook it. And in fact, you can cook it like zucchini at any stage because it just has a very similar taste when it's smaller or larger. In fact, it can be a wonderful decoration for Halloween because it can be yay long and yay wide. So it's like zucchini in that respect too, but much more interesting because it grows on a vine and it takes up less space.
So Jeanette, do you use the green peppers as well as the red peppers?
Yes, I can eat them at any stage, but I like the flavor, and it seems to develop better flavor when they're red. In fact, the Carmen there has a bit of spiciness to it, which is really nice. I use it in a mild salsa with the tomatoes. I can use the red or the green to dry. I can dry them for a snack. So they're quite versatile, really. And I like a variety of different kinds, which is why I tried different things with 14 different plants and 7 varieties here. And one of the things I tried is to see if they would warm up even more. I know the terracing helps, but then the black plastic also does help because some of these are more developed on the black plastic than they were down below where they're just in dirt. So this really does benefit them. But there again, each one develops in a little bit different way, and these peppers are a pimento. And I might grow them again because they do develop quite a few little peppers. Some of the others just developed one set and then they're getting kind of slow on developing, although there are quite a few on this side. So it depends on the year, it depends on so many variables whether or not you can grow peppers. Lots of people don't grow peppers in Port Townsend outdoors because they haven't had such good luck with the weather. But I have had pretty good luck with the terracing and the choices. The choices of the type that this is, called a bullhorn type, develops quicker than, say, the ones that are more rounded. You know, if they're longer and pointed and aren't too thick, then they develop better in Port Townsend. They need less heat, just like the small cherry type tomatoes.
One of the things that I didn't ask you was which way is your garden facing?
This is south, right here.
Ah.
Yeah, so that helps. And the breeze, even though it's a little breezy here today, fortunately, when the north wind comes, it doesn't hit this very badly. So that's why I'm able to grow some things here that you might not be able to grow otherwise.
Now these must be ever-bearing raspberries.
Yes, they are. They will actually give you 2 crops. You don't cut them away, and they will give you a second crop once they've also bared in June. So they'll bear till frost if you keep them keeping them going up. So they have some wonderful flavor too.
I'm gonna try.
Those 2 varieties are Amity and Autumn Bliss. I'm not sure which is which, but they're very good.
I see that you have some yellowing on some of these leaves. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, fertilizing isn't as easy as maybe people think, and sometimes you miss an area, or I have put some iron supplemented into this area, but this area maybe I missed because there isn't very much others. So it's usually a chlorotic problem, and usually you put a little iron and a little bit of other organic fertilizer in so that the plant can absorb that better.
Well, I would imagine they'd be a little bit heavier feeders than the one-sparing, since they've got to put out
true.
2 crops.
That's true. So they are in good soil to begin with, but then we do fertilize them with organic materials, and so they are bearing very nicely at the moment.
I see, Jeanette, on this side of the garden, you have a lot of succulent plants, a lot of herbs mixed in, woolly thyme. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've got lining the pathways here?
The turf stone is very heavy. It's like 60 pounds and like 18 inches long by a foot wide. And so we use these as stabilizers on this hillside because we wanted to do something over here, but we didn't really want to worry about amending the soil very much. So we have drought-tolerant plants over here, and also the turf stone lets water go through it. So there's so much slope here that we had to have some pathway that would be stable enough to let us move around. So yeah, I do have rosemary, and this is a southern wood. There's all kinds of interesting things over here, but it's very drought tolerant over here. Sages, a bunch of different kinds of sages too. And then I've got a couple of tomato plants that I put over here as well to experiment with them. One of them is a Stupice, and one of them is a Oregon Spring, and I wanted to see how they would do in the rock garden, because last year actually one of the Oregon Spring did quite well in the rock garden. And they've done well, and one nice thing is that the soil warms up because of the rocks, just like in the terraces, but even more so right here in very full sun. So I've had good crops from these 2 plants. Their soil is much less fertile, so it means I don't have to trim them as much. And I just use a very slow running drip, essentially, watering them as well. And they have some added good soil in them. But here again, there's some cracking in this one because it's getting cold already.
Jeanette, these look like beautiful jewels in your garden. Now you've got another system here for tomatoes.
That's right.
Tell us about this.
Well, this has sacks of soil in it. It's not as fertile as what I have down there. and the depth isn't as good. But the tomatoes seem to like that okay. In fact, the flavor seems better. Last year I experimented with the same kind of tomato down there and up here, and I felt like there was better flavor. And the reason is that the soil isn't as rich. I don't have to prune it again as much. And it gets warm here, and I can take them and put them around in back here where it's covered so that they don't split as much. Because unfortunately, Sun Gold tends to split, but it's got a wonderful flavor. And this system works pretty good. Unfortunately, I had to trellis them very carefully, because if you get something this tall in a half barrel, it's going to be very wobbly, so you have to secure it pretty well. And the other one is Sweet Baby Girl, and that one's worked really well for me too. I wouldn't do it with big tomatoes, basically small tomatoes, in just one of them per barrel is really the way I do it. You could get another one in, but I choose to put my basil in there. I'm trying to keep it from the slugs, but it's got some copper around it. So that's a good way to keep basil as well in general. So these are my two that I can just come down and pick off very easily.
The other thing that you should show us is that you have these on wheels.
That's right. So I can
you
pull
can
them around.
pull them around, or you could turn them, keep
Right.
them getting sun all the way around.
Pull them around here. Unfortunately, I also have a barrier here, so they don't go flying down the stairs. But I can turn them and move them back into the area back here where they won't get rained on.
You don't have a lot of room over here, but I see you have fig trees.
Yeah, they've been here since 2006, and I'm trying to espalier them, which means I'm trying to train them along the fence here. And because we don't have a lot of room, what we did was we put some wire along the fence way up there for the grapes, and down here I put in some figs because they're fairly drought tolerant as well. When they get bigger and stronger, they'll be more drought tolerant. And one of our problems too is if you don't try to keep them trained on something, they tend to get damaged. And this one got pulled off by some wind. But you can also see, just barely maybe, the little bitty fruits. Now these won't ripen, but I have gotten some ripe fruit. Now when they get ripe, we found one. When they get ripe, they kind of hang down like this, so that they're ready. They've got plenty of moisture inside of them. And this one is a pink one inside. I'll open it up. Very, very lovely inside. I can still eat that.
Do you eat the skin as well as the inside?
Yeah, it's no problem at all to eat. It's very soft. It's very meaty and soft, and then the inside kind of looks strange, but it's all very, very edible. But they keep bearing until they get too cold.
So you can be picking fruit all summer long?
Well, not all summer. They don't really ripen until like August. So yeah, it's a kind of a smallish window. But the bigger they get, the more fruit I'll get, and they are very, very tasty. This one's called Desert King, and the other one is Italian Honey. And I figured if they get too big, I will just take one of them out because, depending on which one I like the best. I've got the versatility to, be able to do that. But it's also another drip kind of irrigation factor here because I have so much slope. But the only way you can truly water these things in Port Townsend is to do it very slowly, because if you just let it run, it just runs right off. And so I just take a hose and let it go very slowly on these when they need water.
Do you compost these leaves? Can you?
Well, you certainly could. I haven't gotten a compost set up at this point, but yeah, you could. It's a little harder when it's woody, but otherwise, yeah. My only problem has been earwigs. Earwigs love them. And I my husband figured out, that they actually live under the caps of the fence right there, the fence post. So I haven't been very successful in getting rid of them at this point, but I still have to work on that. The newspaper trick with the rolled up newspaper didn't work very well, so I'm still working on my earwig problem.
I think you have to get out really early in the morning. If you don't get out really early in the morning, then they're gone.
From the newspaper?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm learning all the time.
Jeanette, I've heard of people dressing up their dogs, but your apples?
Well, they need this little sock on them so they don't get holes in them from a borer, and so this one fell off, so we decided to use this one. You can just barely see that it's got a little problem there where it got bruised, but it doesn't have any other holes in it. So these little stockings do help keep them from getting the apple maggot, I believe that's what it is, apple maggot on them. But you can just, when they're tiny, you put these on and you squunch them around the stem, and they work very well for keeping bugs out.
And where do you get them?
I believe the Fruit Club may be a good resource.
Or you could use old pantyhose, and that would be a good way to recycle. In one of our previous shows, we talked about the garlic scapes and making it into pesto, so I'm really interested in learning how to plant the garlic.
Well, this is good garlic to plant, because what I did was took the biggest ones that I harvested in July, dried them. Depends on which way you hear about it. It's some say in the sun, some say not in the sun. I've done a combination of both, and they seem to have done fine. These are elephant garlics, and my elephant garlic stalks look like this, and they're pretty big. And what you can really benefit by is planting the same thing, roughly the same area, year after year, and it actually gets used to your soil and your conditions, and you get bigger garlics. I saw some at the fair that I thought were really small, and because I have pretty good sized garlics, and I think it comes from taking the biggest pieces, again, the biggest, just one of these, you'd plant one of these about 3 times the depth of this one, 2 extra times I should say, and then you put them in the fall. You plant them in October in good soil and water them in, and they should produce for you and get big enough to harvest in July or August, depending on the location you have. But some people say not to water them. I do water them because I have very sandy soil. It depends on your soil. But the elephant garlic, it is related more to the leek, but I've had good luck with it, and I don't really like very spicy garlic, so I am fine with this, and it produces lovely heads.
So if this kind of flies in the face of conventional wisdom, is you rotate your crops so that you don't get the same diseases, but you're saying with the garlic that it's better to get it used to one location.
Well, I'm not saying to plant it right in the same spot every year necessarily. In fact, one of my authors that I respect, Four Season Gardening, says that you don't plant it with where you had cole crops, broccoli and cabbage, because it won't get as big. So I'm not sure, I haven't had that problem, but the biggest problem I guess I have is knowing how much water to water them, and the best time to harvest them then, though, is when their tops start to go with some of the leaves getting yellow. And you don't always exactly know when that is, but definitely don't harvest them after the rains have come. So you're going to have rotting garlic in the ground. But I really enjoy my garlic, so these are a good thing, easy thing, basically, for people to do, as long as they get their garlics in the fall and harvest them then, and plant them then.
In my garden, I plant carrot seeds. In my garden, I plant carrot seeds. Earth is my trusted partner. Earth is my nurturing mother. Earth is my protecting father. Earth is my beloved child. Earth is my trusted partner. Earth is my nurturing mother. Earth is my protecting father. Earth is my hope for the future. In my garden, I plant carrot seeds.